besides salvation, the messages I preach on salvation, preaching on the home and the family, I guess, is as dear to my heart as anything that I have the joy and the privilege to speak on. Several years ago, my trip to Germany, I was going to preach on Wednesday night in a city called Wiesbaden, right outside of Frankfurt, and speaking for Chuck Sly, who, by the way, we still support. He's in a different town, city now, but working with American military. And he picked me up at Brother Eddie Buford's church, and we were driving there, and Chuck said, he said, "Preacher," said, "I understand you speak a lot on the home, on family." I said, "Well, quite a bit." And he said, "Would you do that tonight if God would lead you?" And I told him, I said, "Chuck," I said, "to be honest with you, this is my first time in your church and around your folks. And those messages usually are a little bit long." And he said, I promise it won't matter to our folk." I said, "Well, if that's what you feel like God wants, I don't mind doing it." So that night I preached for about an hour and 40 minutes. And I said, "Folk, I am so sorry that it's taken so long." And the captain stood up and he said, "Preacher, is that all you got?" I said, "Well, no, I got more." And he said, "Well, we don't do anything till 8 o'clock in the morning." I said, "Well, dear Lord." So I went about another hour. And as soon as it was over with, Chuck and Susan said, if it's all right with you, we've lined up for our 3 deacons and their wives for us to go out to eat and for you to tell them how to be a good deacon." I finally got to my room about 3:30 in the morning and just enjoyed it. But I thoroughly enjoyed, because the truths that we're going to deal with are so very, very important. If there's anything that is true, it is true that Satan hates your home. He hates your marriage. He hates your children. He is your enemy. He is not your friend. This world that is under the control of Satan is going to do everything that it can to destroy your marriage and destroy your children. Many of you are old enough that when you were the ages of our young people that are back in their service and these young people that are here that sang tonight, about the worst thing kids would do, they might smoke a cigarette or drink a beer. Now there is so much available out there that one time can kill them. Satan despises your family. If you and your wife, you and your husband love each other, and you have a strong relationship, let me tell you something. Satan's put a target on your back. And the amazing thing is that it seems like, as I preach in different places, and honestly, even here, I wonder if folks have not given up on the possibility of having a great, successful Christian family. One thing that I notice, and again, y'all can get upset at me, and that's perfectly all right. I'll get upset right back at you, is that church has ceased to be important in so many of our couples' lives. Sunday morning, fairly important if there's not something else we want to do. I really wonder sometimes, there's 2 things that when I was a youth pastor that I really had to struggle with, and I still struggle with it as a pastor. And that is, one of them, when parents are going to discipline their children, they take them out of church. You can't go to the youth activity because you didn't clean your room up. Now, I've never said this to an individual person, but when that happens, I want to ask if they are an ignoramus in any other area of their life. Church and an active youth program and in a Sunday school class with a godly teacher, they're going to get the help they need and that you need them to have to become more obedient and to more compliant to what you want. Don't take them out of where they're going to get help. Matter of fact, of course, I wasn't even saved. My parents punished me by making me go. I didn't want to go, but I went under protest. But that protest was under my breath. I never did say it out loud. The other thing is, not only do they take them out of church to punish them, but then when I see parents that want to be more friends with their kids than leaders. I'll say more about that later. Notice here in Psalm 127, notice 1. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh in vain. You know who really builds your house? The Lord. Now, the Lord works through mom and dad, sons and daughters, grandparents, uncles and aunts. He uses all of that, but it's the Lord that does it. Now, how does He do that? He does it by giving us the principles of having a successful marriage. When my mother died, and matter of fact, it seemed like God spoke to my heart about a week before my mom died that she was not going to make it. And I went to my dad and asked him if I could preach Mother's funeral. And I started preparing a message. And I started putting down some memories that I had. And I'd asked my sisters about some memories they had, and my brothers. And it dawned on me. And I went to all of my siblings. And I said, y'all going to have to help me on this. I said, I cannot remember my mom and dad ever arguing. They began to think. And they said, well, we can't either. Now, I know that R.J. and Edith Collier argued. I had to learn it somewhere. More than likely, it was on my mama's side of the family. But I had to learn it. But they argued out of earshot and vision of the children. Now, that's two people that had an 8th grade education. But they had a wagon full of wisdom. Except the Lord built it. In other words, folk, if we don't put Him first, you're laboring in vain. Now, it is vain for you to rise up early and to sit up late and to eat the bread of sorrows, for He giveth His beloved sick. Trust Him. Rely upon Him. This world and all that it tries to do can sure take your sleep away. Can take your rest away. Rest in the Lord. Trust Him. But then notice what David said. Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of His womb is His reward. One of the greatest blessings to a marriage is the birth of a child or children. I did not realize how much you could love someone besides your mate until Wynn was born. And you know what I found out? You don't love your wife less. God just gives you enough to go around. But you love that child. Boy, I was a little scared when Virginia revealed to me that we were expecting our second one. And I thought, man, how can I love somebody as much as I love this one? God gives you enough to go around. Of course, it's easier loving little girls than it is little boys. But did you see what he said? The fruit of the womb, children, that's God's reward to you. I read something the other day, I thought it was funny. It said, grandchildren is God's reward to you for not killing your kids. I thought, boy, that is something. Matter of fact, I thought of you, Brother Steve. That was good. All right. Verse 4, as heirs are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. You know what a guy does who is an archer? Boy, he checks those arrows out. He makes sure the feathers are exactly right. He makes sure the length. He knows the weight of his point. He makes sure that they're straight, they're not bent. That's what he's talking about here. When your children are young, you train them. You spend time with them. I'll say more and more and more about this, but don't ever think that your children want quality more than quantity. Are y'all hearing what I'm saying? I don't know how many times, especially dads, I hear them say, well, I don't have a lot of time with my kids, but boy, those times that I have with them, it's real quality time. Well, that's good. But you'll never make a child understand the real difference in quantity and quality. All they'll know is that Daddy wasn't there, Mama wasn't there. Even if you try to make it up, you never get those times back. Spend time. When we were in revival work, our revivals always went Sunday morning through Friday night. And I told the pastor, I'm yours on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, but Thursday's my day off. I'll be at church, but Thursday's the day I spend with my children. And we spent all day with Wynn and Vonda on Thursdays. You know what they love to do? Now, two things. One, they love getting their bicycles and riding to the nearest McDonald's. Or number two, going to the local cemetery and riding all around the cemetery on their bicycles. See, that didn't cost money. It cost time. It cost time. Spend time with your children. Then notice, happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. Quiver is it's either what you shake or it's what you hold arrows in. Some quivers I was reading about will hold up to 75 arrows. I hope that's not the quiver he's talking about right here. I've heard a lot of Bible teachers say that in Israel a quiver was about 13. Well, my quiver was smaller. It only had 2 arrows in it. Notice, they shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate. Why? Because he's happy with his family. His family is a success. Now, don't answer out loud, but I want you to think about this. In this society that we're living in today, is it possible to have a great Christian home. Absolutely. You're seeing in our society, you're seeing a lot of sad figures. Let me give you several of them that I looked up. 24 million children in America, that's 1 out of every 3, live in a home without a father. 1 out of every 3. I was just talking with a couple this last week, and they were having to deal with a situation about a relative and child support. And I said this, and I mean this. If my wife and I, if we would have ever gotten a divorce, nobody would have to tell me to support my child. Nobody would have to make me support my child. Isn't it amazing that we have to have a whole division of the Attorney General's office in the state of Texas to try to get child support paid for children that that individual helped bring into this world? 40% of all babies born in the United States in 2011 were born to unwed mothers. 40%. I would dare say that's higher now than it was the last time they did the study. I read another fact. As many children are being cared for by grandparents as are by single dads. Grandparents who reared their children, invested in their children, are now having to rear their grandchildren. Now, you excuse me, that is not right. Why? Because we have gotten away from God's plan for the family. When you get away from God, when you're just not doing what God wants you to do in your own personal life, you're not going to be a success at anything that is biblical. What you and I know is the nuclear family. That is a dad that works and a mom that stays home and children that are in the home. That is a thing of the past. Time magazine said that it probably could never return. I read another article this last week. It said that now in many places in the United States, it's taking 2.5 salaries just to live. That means that mom and dad both have to have a full-time job, and either dad or mom has to have a part-time job. We're just getting away from placing the importance on the family. We sometimes think maybe, maybe preacher, that's just the world. No, that's invaded the church also. I'm afraid too many Christian parents neglect to teach and to train their children how to apply the truths of God's Word to their life. As I mentioned a few moments ago, one of the great needs of your children is for you, the parent, to be the leader and not their friend. Children must have parameters. Let me say that a different way. Children have to have rules. They have to have guidelines. They have to have barriers. If they don't mature correctly because they don't really know how far is far enough. I remember when, and again, I'll share with you a lot of the things that Virginia and I did, but one of the things that we did when we would go to a church for revival is I would take Wynn and Vonda out, And we'd walk the property, and I'd say, you can go right to here, but you can't go any further. We'd take them out to the road that would be by the church or the street, and I'd say, you can come up to the sidewalk, but you can't pass that sidewalk. One time Wynn said, well, Daddy, what if my ball goes out there? I said, you come get me. You come get your mother. You don't go out there and get the ball. We'll go out there and get the ball. Now, was I being unkind to set that rule for them? No, I was being kind to them. Why? I didn't want a car or truck to run over him and kill him. It's not worth a ball. Get another ball, it's a little hard to get another son. What would you say, preacher, if they went across that? Oh, it's bad news. Bad news. They have to learn, listen to me very carefully. Now, we're going to get into this in much detail as we go through this summer. Before your son or daughter will ever fear God, they have to fear you. They can't see God. They can see me. I remember one time at the Bill Rice Ranch, what things we did years and years ago at the ranch in disciplining young people who came to the ranch, they'd put us in jail now. Dr. Rice used to spank boys. Now, he'd call and get parents' permission, and if they said, no, don't spank him, we'd just put them on a bus and send them home at the parents' expense. I remember one time we had a rule at the ranch that the boys could never go on the girls' side. Well, Joe, you remember those rules. Steve, you remember those rules. That was a cardinal rule. We didn't want couples getting together after lights out. Y'all hearing what I'm saying? Well, these three boys slipped out of their cabin, and they ran over there and ran in their church's group's room and screamed and hollered, ran out. Didn't see anything, just to scare the girls. Well, of course, my night watch caught them. And the next day, we took them into Dr. Bill Rice's office, and Dr. Rice talked to them, told them, he said, now guys, that's one of our 4 major rules. If it's a major rule, it's major consequence. Now you have a choice. You can be spanked, or you can go home. And boys, if I was y'all, I'd go home. That's what I'd do. No, we want to stay. We want to stay. And so he called the parents and told them what they'd done, and they need to have a spanking. And all 3 parents said, boy, do it, and tell them when they get home, they're getting another one. Dr. Rice said, well, that's your decision, but I promise you they won't need another one when they get home. We took them up to the John Rice Auditorium, took 2 boys downstairs, and got this first one up there, and Dr. Rice went over it again for him, and Dr. Rice took his belt off and put the buckle in his hand and folded it over and had him lean over a pew, and we dropped his blue jeans down. He did. Dr. Rice spanked him. We held his arms and legs so he wouldn't get hit any place but his buttocks. Did it to the second one. Third one came up, and he said, I've changed my mind. He said, of course, he didn't see anything or anything. You're too far away. He said, I'm not going home either. Dr. Rice, now, son, said, we've already gone through this. I've always been a long-distance call, calling your mama. Said, take your blue jeans down, son. I told you I'm not going to do that. He looked at Bill Third and me and Ted Kemp and Don Cabby. He said, okay, boys, take his britches down. We took his blue jeans down and laid him over there. Dr. Rice spanked him. We let him up. He said, now, son, that's for not taking your britches down when I told you to. This next one's going to be for breaking the rules. I said, oh, dear Lord, I am never breaking another rule as long as I live. By the way, all 3 of those boys got saved that week. Dr. Rice would never spank a child after Wednesday. He said, I don't have time to love them back. I need time to love them back. Every day he'd leave the office in the afternoon. He'd come down, find those boys, and he'd talk to them, buy them a Coca-Cola or something, ice cream cone. Loved on them. All three of them got saved. You think every boy you whipped got saved? I doubt it. A bunch of them did. But they needed a leader. They had to have rules that they knew, boy, if I break that rule, something's going to happen. So many times, we as parents, the only time we want to spank our child is when we're mad at them. They broke a rule or they embarrassed us. Y'all hearing what I'm saying? They did something that embarrassed us. So you're getting it as soon as we get home. You're getting it, boy. And it's really not because of what they did. It's the fact that it made you look bad. And let me be honest with you. If you're parenting at home the way you should, they probably won't embarrass you many times in public. They need leaders. They've got to have rules. If you tell your child you got to be in at 10 o'clock, that's not 10:01. That's 10 o'clock. If you tell them, you get in there and do that, we're going to go get an ice cream. When they do it, go get an ice cream. Don't lie to your kids. Be truthful with them. Today's church, even churches like ours, are seeing many young people. I was reading a survey in some churches, as high as 70% of young people leave the faith of their fathers when they get out of home. 70%. Is there hope? Absolutely. But we are destined to failure in our marriage, in our children, in our homes, if we don't do it God's way. And it's easy to understand. Here's what happened. Well, that was for that age back there. This is different. No, human nature is the same since Adam. Brothers have been getting mad at each other since Cain and Abel. Siblings have been fighting since Esau and Jacob. Human nature doesn't change. And God's way to handle it doesn't change. It might have been in my Sunday school class some time ago I told this, but when our first grandson was born, our oldest grandchild, Wyatt, well, we were over there. They lived in Clemson, South Carolina at the time. Wynn was pastoring there. So we were over there for the birth and stayed several days afterwards. And one day Wynn said, "Daddy, can we go get a cup of coffee? I want to talk to you." I said, "Sure." We went, got a cup of coffee, and he said, "Daddy, Miska and I have decided we're not going to spank our children." He said, "I know you won't agree with that." I said, "Well, you're right. I don't. But I'll honor that. You're the parents. I'm not. But don't leave him by himself with me." Because he's going to mind me. And he's going to mind your mother. I'm not going to let a rebellious child sit there and tell his grandmother, "Shut up." That's like hitting me in the face with a dead rabbit. You just don't do that. Wyatt got about 2.5. My phone rang one day. Wynn said, "Daddy, we changed our mind." I said, "Well, what caused you to change your mind?" He said, "This time out's not working." Let me tell you, honestly, I would have loved time out when I was a kid. Sit over there in the corner and go to sleep? Yeah. I didn't like going to the woodshed. I'm not talking about beating your child. Well, I am, really, I guess, but I'm not talking about abusing your child. Notice, listen to it, Ephesians 6:4. And you fathers, provoke not your children to wrath. You know what that means? Don't keep your word with them. Don't lie to them. You know what that means? Don't be wishy-washy. That's going to make them mad. I've had both of my children tell me after they were grown, married, Daddy, the rules you and Mama had at home sure helped us in some difficult situations. When our friends wanted to do something or stay out late, no, I got to be home. Because most of their friends had heard me teach and preach and knew what would happen to Win and Vonda if they were late. And Win and Vonda knew their mother, we kept our word with them. Consistency, that's the key. Being consistent. Provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture. Look that up. That word nurture means enforced discipline. Time out. You go sit over there. Well, if you do that, leave him there a week. Don't just do it for 5 minutes. Take all of his food, his bed away, all of his clothes, make him sit there naked. That might work, I don't know. But anyway. Bring him up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. That word admonition means bringing attention to. Continue to teach them what is right. And by the way, parents, it's hard to expect anything of your children if you hadn't taught them what you want. They can't read your mind. Well, they ought to know what I want. All right. Can you read your wife's mind, husband? That's good. God has given His Word to guide us. He's given us His grace to enable us. This job of child rearing is not easy. It's not a quick fix. You cannot just sit by and let your children rear themselves. God's given them to you as a heritage. They're on loan. God wants them to be trained as an arrow so that you can take that arrow and God can fire it and it'll hit the target that He aims it to. I need to remember, as a parent, you have to work at your own spiritual growth. You have to work at maturing your own walk with Christ before you can lead and teach and instruct and train your children. Over the years, I've witnessed young people that were stronger Christians than their mom and dad were. That's a shame. That's a shame. You and I need to always remember that God's principles are for you and for this day in which we are living right now. God wants us to have happy, good children. One of the things that, as a pastor, I desire is to have moms and dads embrace biblical truths and then to rear their children for the Lord. I'm so glad that Brother Joey and Steve and Doug asked me to do this series this summer, because homes in America, homes in Waco, are in desperate straits. Don't raise your hand, don't answer out loud, but let me ask you as parents, what do you want for your children? What kind of future do you want your children to embrace and enjoy? You see, and remember this, if you don't remember much that I said tonight, remember this. As an adult, you are right now what you have been becoming. Your children, to some degree, are right now all that you've trained them to be. Are you happy with it? Or do you want them to have better? Notice I didn't say be better. To have better. Not more, better. I'm 75 years old. I have never had my dad, of course he's in heaven now, but while he was alive, I never had my dad instigate prayer with me. I never had my dad to get Mom and me into the living room and take the Bible and us read the Bible together. Talk about it. Never had that. Never had Mom to pray with me. Now, part of that is they were not trained to do that. I can never remember that being taught in the churches that we attended. Family altar. Prayer time with your kids. By the grace of God, my two can't say that. I have never not enjoyed praying with my kids. I call my grandchildren. They all have phones now. And a lot of times in the afternoon when I know they're out of school, I'll call them. And I'll just say, hey, 2 things. Your Paul loves you. And I've prayed for you today. You know one of the things I pray for them? God, keep them away from bad influence. Keep them with some good kids. I really pray that for all 4 of them, even though Kylie and Brindley go to Christian school. Christian school kids have just as big problems as public school kids do. You know, Brother Travis, one of the things that's bothered me for ever since I've been preaching in Christian schools, at how hard it is in a Christian school for Christian kids to take a stand for Christ. When I was youth pastor, we didn't have Christian schools. And out of that youth group came some of the strongest Christians because their faith was tested every day in the public school, even back then. A young man that was in my youth group at Lavon Drive, one of the best young men I ever had in my youth groups. He pastors now in Herndon, Virginia. He's the new chairman of the Board of Trustees at BIMI. I nominated him, when was that? Yesterday morning. I nominated David. David told everybody, he said, he's been throwing me under the bus my whole life. But hardly a Sunday went by that Dave Pittman didn't walk that aisle with some boy from Richardson High School that he had led to Christ that week. Athlete, carried his big Bible about my size. He'd put it right on top of his books and carry it down the hallway. One time one of the football players said, Pittman, only sissies carry a Bible. He said, okay, you carry it then. Oh, man. Dave said, you thought I'd shot him with a gun. We need to teach our children that we love them, demonstrate that love, and pour ourselves and Jesus Christ into our children. Because if you train up a child in the way that he should go, when he's old, he'll still be going in that way. We're going to stop there. God bless you.